guys? Welcome to another episode of Guts and Glory World War II podcast, episode chapter 19, The Fall of Berlin, Germany's Last Stand. Berlin, Germany, April 30th, 1945. The war had finally come to the streets of Berlin. With a triumphant swagger, the tramping boots of 2.5 million Russian soldiers now shook the rebel-strewn streets of the German capital. These were street fighters, veterans of brutal slugfests at Leningrad, Moscow, Stalingrad, and those other grueling battles across Poland and eastern Germany. And they were laying waste to the once proud city, clearing it out of resistance street by street, supported by 41,000 artillery cannons, 6,000 tanks, and 6,500 bomber aircraft. The men and women of the Red Army pounded the heart of the German Reich. Infantry with submachine guns and rifles advanced under the cover of smoke grenades. T-34s fired point-blank into apartment buildings to level Nazi sniper nests. Katyusha rocket launcher trucks unleashed barrages of explosives by the dozen. Heck, the Soviets had even brought machine gun-equipped motorboats to put in the river. In their way were just a couple 100,000 heavily outnumbered, demoralized, and outmatched Germans. These guys make up the Volkssturm, which sounds all cool and everything because it's German for People's Storm, but in reality it was just a deorganized group of teenage boys, old men in their 60s, and Berlin city police officers who had been thrown together to try to stop the entire might of the Soviet Union. Fighting in regular street clothes and using outdated rifles from the World War I era, these makeshift troops did everything they could to defend their homes. They barricaded streets, laid out barbed wire, set landmines, and hid machine guns and overturned streetcars. At the heart of the city, in his bomb-proof bunker deep beneath the garden of the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler stubbornly clung to the last remaining shreds of his empire, hiding out with his girlfriend, Eva Braun, his dog, Blondie, a German shepherd, of course, and a few trusted generals. The leader of Nazi Germany attempted to strategize victory as he ordered insane counterattacks that could never happen. He held on to the delusion that the German 12th Army would disengage frontline American forces 60 miles away and come running over to Berlin to save him. And when his commanders told him he was nuts, he just yelled at them a lot and then fired them for being idiots. The fighting above was converging on the Reichstag building. Erected in 1894, this was a domed concrete government building several stories high that was home to the lower parliament of the German Congress and was the traditional capital of Germany. It was here in 1933 that a fire had allowed Hitler to seize power and crush his political enemies. Now it was the symbolic heart of his rapidly disintegrating Reich, defended by the final grim remnants of the elite SS soldiers. For the Russians, final victory in World War II would only come when a red Soviet flag was flying from the roof. Knowing full well that this was their last stand, the SS turned the Reichstag into a fortress. These fanatical warriors were determined to make sure the Soviets paid in blood for every inch of land they gained. 5,000 men from the SS, the Hitler Youth, basically Nazi Boy Scouts, and cadets from the Berlin Naval Academy bricked up the doors, cut loopholes for machine guns, overturned buses to serve as barricades, and fortified the over 400-yard-wide plaza with flooded ditches, anti-tank trenches, sandbag machine gun nests, and even a couple of 88mm anti-aircraft flak artillery cannons. At 4 a.m. on April 30th, 1945, the men of the Red Army's 150th Rifle Division, 79th Rifle Corps, 3rd Shock Army, were given orders to storm the Reichstag. The attack began with an artillery bombardment from Katyusha rocket trucks and epic 220mm artillery guns, raining down missiles and explosives and anti-concrete bombs on enemy positions just a few hundred yards ahead of the main Soviet lines. Under the cover of the explosions and smoke, screaming Red Army troops ran toward the main gate of the Reichstag, drawing heavy fire from trenches, sniper shots in the windows, and point-blank cannon shots from SS artillery gunners. Across the plaza, machine gun nests opened up from the Kroll Opera House, a place where composers like Strauss and Wagner once put on classical music concerts. The guns were silenced only after a Soviet artillery cannon 3 miles away dropped a 540-pound shell into the building that blasted a crater measuring 30 feet across. The Ministry of the Interior, home to Germany's infamous Gestapo secret police, suffered a similar fate. Explosions also raked the Red Army lines, driving the Russians back with heavy losses. The unrelenting Russians came on again at 11:30 a.m., though, and again by 1 p.m., both times being hammered by hellish fire. The SS shot bazookas from third-story windows, hurled grenades from the trenches, and they even called in mortar fire from a cannon position in the Berlin Zoo a few hundred yards away. The last Tiger tanks in the German arsenal drove up into the lawn outside the capital, firing heavy 88mm shells into the Russian lines and spraying bullets from their 3 machine guns. Now, here's a weird thing that happened. During the attack at 1 p.m., some Russian dude remarked that he thought he'd seen a red banner hanging from the Reichstag. He hadn't. In fact, the Russians hadn't been within 200 yards of the front door of the place, so whatever the heck this guy saw was some kind of hallucination. Unfortunately, someone reported this sighting to Marshal Georgy Zhukov, commanding officer of the Russian army in Berlin, who got so pumped up about the whole thing, he called Stalin on the phone to tell him what was up. Stalin then broadcast the victory on the radio to every single person in the Soviet Union. The story was picked up on Western radio, and by 2:30 every human being on Earth thought there was a red banner flying from the German Reichstag. Then someone told Zhukov, no, that's not actually 100% true. Now, Stalin wasn't the sort of totalitarian dictator who would be cool about the idea of looking like an idiot in front of the entire world, and he was the kind of guy who would have a commander or two executed for something like this. So Zhukov freaked out and ordered his men to have a red banner hanging from the roof of the Reichstag at some point on April 30th, 1945, or he was going to start personally punching people. So at 6 p.m., the men of the 150th Rifle Division were ordered to capture the building no matter what. Racing through the smoke and dust and fire, the ferocious might of the Red Army stormed their way across the bridge into the plaza, where Soviet artillery dropped explosives just a few hundred feet in front of them. The Russians ran through minefields, charged into trenches, and drove T-34 tanks right out to the front to shoot down the bricked-up entrance. Battle-hardened men of the Soviet Union shouldered through the thick iron doors, racing to the main hallway of the German government, where members of the parliament had once debated and given speeches. From the second floor, 400 SS stormtroopers rained fire and grenades down on the Russians, defending their government building with unbridled fury. Above the Senate floor, the white dome of the Reichstag roared in flames, sprinkling burning rafters and broken glass down on the assaulting Russians. The Soviets suffered badly, but these tenacious fighters hadn't come so close to victory only to return back now. These were veteran men and women who had survived bloody fighting across the Eastern Front and watched their homes and cities burned and their families killed by the invading German soldiers. They had liberated concentration camps, survived sieges, and witnessed the horrors of Nazi brutality up close and personal. The last thing on their mind was mercy or compassion. They wanted revenge. Leading a small squad of men, Captain Stepan Neustrorev of the 1st Battalion, 756th Rifle Regiment, led his men down the wood-paneled hallways of the Reichstag's second floor. Every room was barricaded and full of Nazis, but this veteran officer had already been wounded twice in this war and wasn't afraid of something as insignificant as a dozen Germans with machine guns trying to kill him, shooting through doors, climbing over barricades, and clearing rooms with hand grenades. Neustroyev and his men raced through the burning building, fighting for every step. At 10:30 p.m., 4 hours after they'd entered, Neustroyev and his squad were on the roof of the German Reichstag. One of his men climbed onto a statue of Kaiser Wilhelm, the German leader during World War I, and planted a large red Soviet banner high above the war-torn streets of Berlin. In his bunker, less than a mile away, the leader of Germany knew his 12-year reign was finally at an end. As enemy troops closed in, Adolf Hitler married his girlfriend, then poisoned his dog, and then he and Eva killed themselves, her by poison, him by shooting himself with the same kind of gun James Bond carries. Hitler's men carried his body out to the garden and set it on fire to keep the Russians from being able to parade it around. Hitler was 10 days away from his 56th birthday. The Germans kept fighting around Berlin, but at 2:41 a.m. on May 7, 1945, the last remnants of the German army signed an official agreement of unconditional surrender. The war in Europe was finally over. Raising the flag. Perhaps the most iconic photo of World War II is the picture of 5 Marines and a U.S. Navy corpsman raising an American flag atop Mount Suribachi on the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. When the Marine Corps stormed the island in early 1945, they had to fight their way with fire and steel through 22,000 fanatical enemy soldiers who battled until nearly every single one of them was dead. At the height of the battle, men from the 5th Marine Division reached the summit of the Rocky Mountain, dominating the island, and raised the flag to show their comrades it was now under Marine control. The photo, taken by Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer Joe Rosenthal on February 23, 1945, created such a powerful feeling among Americans that the Soviet Union decided it would be a great propaganda move to totally borrow that idea and take a selfie with the red flag over the Reichstag. So, well after the actual raising the flag, a couple of Russians staged their own version of it, and, as expected, the picture is now the deafening photo for the Battle of Berlin. Commissars. Most Red Army units were joined by a Communist Party political officer known as a Commissar, who would fight with them on the battlefield. The Commissar held a rank equal to the commander of the unit, and it was his job to lecture the soldiers on the wonders of the Communist Party and their glorious struggle against global Nazism, usually by yelling pump-up words of encouragement during battle and then pulling his pistol and shooting any Soviet soldier who tried to run away from the battle. Hitler, as you can expect, wasn't too fond of these guys, and he had a standing order in the German army that any captured Red Army political officers were to be executed on sight. They were easy to identify because they wore really cool-looking hats, an order that was routinely ignored by many German officers.